The head of Georgia's elections says he feels like the president has thrown him under the bus. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has been fending off false claims of election fraud from fellow Republicans. They have not provided any evidence.
Today, Raffensperger shared his thoughts in USA Today. Our Joe Hinkie spoke with political analysts about the ongoing back and forth.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and the election system he oversees has been under a national microscope since Election Day. Today, he attempted to defend the integrity of his office as they prepare for two crucial U.S. Senate races. The headline of the opinion article published by USA Today reads, "My family voted for Trump. He threw us under the bus anyway." Secretary of State and Republican Brad Raffensperger writes, "Elections are the bedrock of our democracy. They need to be run fairly and, perhaps more important, impartially. That's not partisan. That's just American. Yet some don't see it that way." In 2018, Raffensperger ran for Secretary of State and received President Donald Trump's endorsement. Since November 3rd, though, Trump and some of his closest allies have attacked Georgia's voting system, and Raffensperger in particular, with unsubstantiated claims of widespread voter fraud under Raffensperger's watch, leading to now President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Raffensperger writes Trump's campaign refused to accept the facts. Despite attacks, 11 Alive political analyst Mike Hassinger says much of the Republican Party still backs Raffensperger.
Facts are on his side, the numbers are on his side, so that's what he has to use. He's being forced to play whack-a-mole against conspiracy theories that have popped up out of nowhere.
Raffensperger says the election was wildly successful and smooth, even if Trump, the candidate he donated to and voted for, lost. He points to a record 1.3 million absentee by mail ballots being processed, an average election day wait time of 3 minutes, defeating past election day issues in Fulton County, and the completion of Georgia's first statewide election audit. Raffensperger's article comes at a critical time as Georgia will soon decide which party controls the U.S. Senate.
He's writing this article in order to reassure the people in Georgia and the people across the country who are focused on the Georgia elections process.
And if you would like to read Raffensperger's full opinion article, we have a link to it right now on 11alive.com.